Well, we came in 1964, and I was 30. We came by ourselves, but subsequently, my brothers moved up here, and my mom moved up here, and Jerry's father moved up here.
And my stepmother.
Well, yes, he brought her.
And my sister.
Yes.
And her husbands.
Oh, right. Let's not forget.
Not husbands. There were two who came, well, three actually, because her ex-husband, her first husband, came up here as well. That was Ron Merriams of Joyous Lake with his wife. And then her second husband came with her. And then her third husband also came up, you could say, when they all lived, my father, my stepmother, my sister, and her two husbands.
We sound like the Pied Piper.
And my sister's daughter by her first husband, and there were more. They all had a place in Woodland Valley.
So what drew you to Woodstock?
Well, I think initially it was the Wolferts, who my mom was friends with, and I was friends with a friend of their daughter, Ruth, and so I would come up to visit her now and then, and I think it was sort of familiar because of that. And then I liked that it was an artist colony and that it was close to the city, I think was really my first priority. And you?
I think that's true for Grace, not for me.
Mm.
So where I was headed, really, I wanted out of the city deeply. And where I wanted to be was, I can see it in my mind's eye, this farm in the northeast kingdom of Vermont that looked out about 17 miles from the Canadian border. It was beautiful land and the crappiest buildings ever, but there were barns, there was a house, and 170, 80 acres. And it was all, this was 1963. That whole package was $18,000. And I thought we'd move up there, but we didn't. We came here. This was a compromise between staying in the city, which I really couldn't do anymore.
And I loved.
And Grace's work was really there. Her career was there, unfortunately. And going to Vermont, so we came here. And I've never regretted it for an instant after we landed.
Oh.
So what did you have to do to convince Grace that this was a good thing for you?
Put everything in the car. No, it was at that point we were in agreement. We had we came up to see Woodstock. I remember we made a trip up in advance of the move to check it out. I don't think we'd fully decided. But
Well, we lived in the Zener house.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, where the artist who had built it, I always remember this, had his paintings stuffed in the wall for installation.
Insulation.
Insulation,
Yes.
What did I say?
Installation. That too.
That was
That was his installation, yeah.
He built at least three houses in Woodstock. And maybe his name will come back during the course of all of this, but he was well known. This was a big stone house, beautifully, beautifully built, right across the little bridge where the Mellet Farm is in Xena. And in 1959, my law firm in Manhattan was a little Wall Street law firm that several young aspiring lawyers, whatever, we weren't aspiring actually, we were lawyers. We bought and shared, and it was not a good arrangement, but it wasn't terrible. But that introduced us to Woodstock. I'd forgotten
That was
about the
Estella's
sequence.
house.
No,
No,
It's your
oh no, no. It's across the Sawkill.
on the other side.
It's across. Well, let's see. And we came in 1964 as full-time residents. We lived in a little house on Ohio Mountain Road, the Tapuz property. Al Tapuz was a transplanted Armenian rug dealer, and in the just the juice of it was that we paid him a year's rent in advance for the place, which had no heat, and he was going to use the year's rent, or most of it, whatever it needed, to put in a heating system in this ratty little house. And he bought rugs instead. So in September, as it was getting chilly, we took a couple of rugs and an armchair, and in exchange for all the money and the summer's rent, and moved. But while we were at Tapuz, as we think of it, and right after we came up, actually, we had this in mind to do here. We started something called, what was it?
Ohio Mountain Hall.
Ohio Mountain Hall, which was, we knew nothing about the dynamics of this community, that community then. It was a different community then. And we thought that what would be of real interest, it was a polyglot format. There were perhaps about 15, 20 events planned. And they were mainly people that we'd had contact with, I think primarily through work I did in the city, with organizations, pro bono work. We knew peripherally, not as friends, but we knew an awful lot of people. And so people like Dorothy Day of the Catholic Worker went on and on. There were the president of the local John Birch Society, an officer, I think not a president, but of the New York Communist Party, the range like that. What we didn't realize was that, I mean, we came up, I mean, my position had always been as a First Amendment. First Amendment to me is more important than anything. Anything of that nature, any other conceptual. Certainly not more important than our. But we didn't realize that there was a, and here this gets into, you know, most of the people are dead. But there are two points of view about this, so you'll get mine. The other would be diametrically opposite. The artist community at that point and the periphery of the artist community were on the left, as we were, but not the same place on the left. Their left was, for example, a dinner at friends nearby back in the 60s, and we're sitting around the table with a whole bunch of fairly well-known artists and friends, and about 10, 12 of us, and somehow the conversation drifted to a point where I made a comment about how many, it was a very lively conversation, wine, everyone was feeling quite good to that point, and I made a comment about, I forget the number, it might have been 28 million that Stalin killed between the famines and one thing or another. Had some busy days, and there was a profound silence. And then
This was pre-Hungary.
well, it was 60, probably 1966, 7. Our, the hostess who had invited us said, this very soft tone, we don't talk like that. We don't talk like that here. And, well, people couldn't understand, the natural audience for the Ohio Mountain Hall could not understand why we would invite a John Bircher. And there were a couple of others who were, it was a spectrum that we had. The hall was a profound failure. People didn't come except to one event, which was a children's event by the Peter Schumann Bread and Puppet Theater. That was
That was a
well attended.
Spectacular success.
Yes, our one success.
When it was foggy out, it was foggy in the house.
So is that off of Broadview or off of Ohio?
No, it's off of Yerry Hill.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're good to go. Sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Okay, so,
we closed down Ohio Mountain Hall, and since you're going to cut, I'm going to be brief and tell you that the penultimate moment and the big reason for closing it down was that Marge Swan of the Committee for Nonviolent Action was speaking that night, and she had spent a day in New London, I think, Connecticut, picketing at a nuclear sub-installation. She'd spent, I don't know how long, in federal penitentiary for picketing at Los Alamos. And she got in her radio car and she drove. She had a flat. She changed it. She got there late. The thing was scheduled for 8. She got there at 9:15. Nobody was there except Grace and me and a reporter from the local paper and his daughter. And it occurred to me as she was driving up to say, oh, Marge, there were all these people here and they left. Well, she drove up and she told us about the flat, and I told her that no one had come, really. It was our fault. And
It was our fault. We didn't realize we really had to
exactly.
advertise in the local newspaper and let people know. We thought it's a small community, word of mouth. We were
We
just
also
very
put up-
naive.
we put up posters all around town.
Yeah, and we put up a sign outside that kept being vandalized and hauled away. I'd make a sign, it would disappear, I'd make another. But anyway, that's
Anyway, Marge was one of the more delightful people in this world. She heard all this, she smiled, she said, let's go have dinner, and we did. And we closed it that night, and shortly after that, I was approached by, I had not intended to practice law up here at all. But I was approached by some people who had a bad event in town, and that pushed me into a whole lot of things that respond to a bunch of the areas that you guys are interested in hearing about. What happened was that there was a camp in Shandaken somewhere that was had a group of teens in town. Remember, this is 64, early 65, maybe the spring of 65. Kids in their teens, they were on the village green with guitars. The counselors were with them, and they were playing and singing. And this apparently was a problem to the police, the constabulary at the time. There were probably a dozen or more kids. There were 2 counselors, men, young men, probably in their early 20s. They were Sephardic Jews. They were dark. They looked like, to someone who doesn't know Sephardic Jews, or maybe even so, they looked like they were black. At least they did to the chief of the constabulary, police chief. Not going to name his name. I don't know why. He's dead. But in any event, he and his next in line, after hassling them, which they did, to no result. I mean, they were just having fun. Maybe traffic was a little disturbed, whatever. They took the 2 counselors back to the police station, one of the back rooms, and beat the shit out of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so some people called me, and I got to tell you that I'll come to it, called me and said, you know, would you help here? And I agreed. It went through a long process with hearings and proceedings up in Albany. And the chief of police and his, whatever the guy was, his deputy, were dismissed from the force. There's a footnote, which relates to the change of the environment here that occurred. The son of that police chief became a client of mine. And so that case went on for a year and a half because it went beyond just simply having the chief of police and the assistant dismissed. Both these kids had civil rights cases that could be brought, civil actions, possibly criminal actions against the town, against the constabulary of the town. And one of them moved away, and the other one became increasingly reluctant. I mean, he was making a life for himself. He was a student at NYU, and this was in the past. And so I remember, for me, a turning point in how my life turned was meeting with him, this remaining client, plaintiff, on the corner of University Place and 8th Street. I think a place named Cookies was there, a kind of big coffee shop. And rather than go in, we stood outside in the middle of the winter in this biting wind and talked. And he said, I just don't want to go on with it. And at that point, the image that came to me as I walked to the subway was, there's nobody in back of me on this parade at all. I don't want to do this. What I want to do is, because that was a cause, I don't want to do a cause like that. What I want to do is work with individuals and do what I want to do that way. And what I want to do, I don't know that I thought it in these words, I don't think it was that clear then, was to make things better, because I felt there was lots of room to make things better. So that really changed the direction, or it not changed, it made clear, clarified how I wanted to do what I wanted to do.
So is that story representative at the time that it happened to you of attitudes in Woodstock, or was that off the charts in terms of the feeling you got about how people felt towards people of color? Or
well, the next chief of police, whom I got to know pretty well, one day we were standing on the village green right where the New York City bus stops now. And it's summer day and we're chatting. We couldn't be more different, but we had a commonality. We both were attached to the town in different ways, but it's the same town. And I was trying to explain to him because some idiots, not the police, but some idiots had just burned out an encampment of what they considered hippies. They were hippies. Michael Green was one of them. Way up on Hutchin Hill, burned their tents, whatever, chased them. And we were talking about that and had general agreement that this was not the right way to live and to do. And he said, but I just can't understand these kids. I can't understand how they live this way. I don't understand why they dress the way they do, act the way they do. He said, like that guy, and he points across the street to where Oriole 9 or Jarita's is, and there's a guy walking. So that's what I mean. And this guy was, I guess, in his 20s, and he was walking barefoot, long hair, unshaven. It was Bob Dylan. So there's a kind of interesting irony there.
That's really funny.
Grace, how would you answer that question about whether that was somewhat representative of the feeling in Woodstock or different? Or
When
Well-
you first came.
I mean, it was filtered through Jerry's experiences because that's what he was bumping up against. So I guess I kind of absorbed those and assumed that that's what was going on in town. But I didn't have that kind of direct knowledge.
okay, thank you. So let's get
I have a quick question. What was that camp in Shandaken called Camp Alert?
Camp what?
Camp Alert? Was that Camp Alert?
I don't for the life of me remember. No.
Okay, so that's what shaped your, as you say, focused where you wanted to put your efforts in helping individuals. So do you want to hit some high spots about some of the individuals you helped and how that reflects on the community and what was going on here at the time? Is that a good question?
Yeah, that is. I mean, again, the focus of this is really
Woodstock.
your relationship to Woodstock rather than all these wonderful stories that you may have that are part of who you are and your
I
history.
have wonderful stuff.
I know, right. Just to keep that in mind. That's all. That's
Sure.
all. Okay.
Well, I have a perspective on, say, the 60s in Woodstock, which was that, I've talked about this before, it was a time of real flux, commotion. My work was increasingly as a lawyer, and at that point, through the 60s, a pro bono lawyer. I didn't open up a professional office as such. Well, it's a quibble. For years. But what I did do was work with drug busts, only with pot. There may have been other drugs around, there were, but they were, the defendants didn't come to me. And I had a fund that Mike Lang gave me of $10,000 to use. And what I used it for was to bail out sometimes. What I used it mainly for, up until it ended, was to pay the bus fare, buy bus tickets for mainly guys, but must have been some women who were busted for pot. And I convinced the judges then I got the detail on what it cost to process a defendant, hold him overnight in a county jail or longer, and presented this to the solid Republican judges who were, some knew, but some were appalled at what it cost. And I said, here's an alternative. I have a fund. I'll buy a bus ticket and personally escort the defendant onto the bus to Manhattan, and you won't see them again. And that will save the county and the taxpayers, whatever. And without exception, they bought it, one after the other. So no one went to jail until the very last case, several years into this, 3-4 years into this, where the defendant, whom the FBI probably is still looking for, needed bail, and it wasn't a pot bust. It was sort of out of the sphere of everything else that this fund was used for. It was I think a conspiracy to kill the president, Nixon. It was hard to turn my head from that. It was $10,000 bail. It ate up the whole fund, plus some more money had to be put into it because we'd used up a chunk of the fund. And he just, he disappeared. Never been seen or heard from since. So that was the end of the fund. That was the end of the whole, that process. And then I went into practicing law on a more conventional basis, still doing the drug work, but in 70 or 71, I took in partners, and then the whole shape of my work shifted. This is long. There's a lot of stuff here. Grace.
Well, I think I should amend a bit to your question, because I did have direct contact with the community in terms of the kids in school. And I do remember bumping up against some teachers who were very resentful that Kenny, our son, had kind of wild hair.
Beautiful.
It was. And particularly his sports coach, teacher, asked me to have Kenny's hair cut. And I felt as if it was a threat that he would kick him off the team, and Kenny loved basketball if he didn't cut his hair. And I called him up and I said, I feel as if you're blackmailing us, and that's not right. Anyway, Kenny got to keep his long hair, and I remember he was really the only kid when it came to graduation that looked kind of hippie-ish. He looks, and so I remember there was a little bit of tug, push and pull with the school.
A lot.
But
Yeah, but what happened was that you got him back on the basketball team.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, what did you think Woodstock was a good town in which to raise your family?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Again, if you could say that as a complete sentence.
Let's see.
And why?
How did you feel about Woodstock? And,
I felt good about Woodstock. I was a little leery that there were too many drugs around, and I was very watchful and careful that, the kids wouldn't be seduced. I felt as if the education at the elementary school was adequate, but we understood that the high school was not enough of a challenge for both of them. And a private school started up, Ulster Academy, and both kids went there. It was a stretch, I guess, financially, but we felt it was important that they be challenged. And they were, I think, certainly more than they would have been in Onteora. And I was getting feedback from the teachers at Onteora that they needed someplace else.
Well, at the time that I became part of a partnership, first with too much detail. At the time I became part of a partnership, which was 3 lawyers, and then 2, and then 3 again, and 4. Let's see. I was simultaneously buying land. I had an idea for land development that I wanted to pursue. And very simply put, the idea was, and there's a lot of material, I'm sure, at the Historical Society and elsewhere about it, but very briefly, what I wanted to do was to create communities of very limited density, not estates, but limited density, which in this town at that point were the land that I was looking at here and elsewhere. Elsewhere it wasn't even zoned usually. In this town it was 3-acre zoning, and I felt from readings that 5 acres should be the minimum, plus if you took the aggregate, say, like this tract in Wittenberg that I assembled out of 4 parcels, aggregating 927 acres. The density factor there between the 5-acre minimum non-subdivisible lot and the interior park, which was Greenbelt, which was 10% of the, roughly 10% of the acreage, brought it to a 10-acre density, which I felt was a good one. Could have been 20, could have been 50, but that would have priced it way out of feasibility for most people, and I wanted a mix of economic, ethnic, racial. I wanted it as mixed as possible. That's part of what one of the driving principles of Riverby was. In the event, it was initially. I don't think it is anymore. I haven't been around there in a while, but that's the arc of this country and our economic principles. It's nothing that I'm going to be able to change. But I think what you try to do in life is kind of point the direction and take it as far as you can. The properties have gotten awfully valuable. It doesn't make for a great economic mix, let alone any other kind. But it was, to a point, it was fun while it lasted, and I think people tell me, I couldn't tell you firsthand, but people have said to me, people who live there, that they really appreciate it. And that's a kick. That really is.
Okay.
There's still people there who, from the original time, like Alfie the shoemaker,
Alfie
dope
still
dealer,
lives there.
and
Sure.
That other, the carpenter guy.
I
It
think
still has some diverse.
Peter's moved.
Hmm?
Peter
Pete-
Martin's moved.
There was another guy up Alfie Street, and then I remember Checo Miller's brother had tents in a beautiful fairy-like
Oh, we
bunch of acres on that middle way there. Remember that?
yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and we had a piece of property.
I
You
know.
did?
We camped on.
Oh.
Sure.
Yeah, and but some of the original people, like Tony Rulo's property, is still there. I mean, I think the original people who bought in are
There are a
not
number of them
those
who are
estates
still
from
there,
New York.
and
Hmm.
I still connect with them at
Right.
times. But I mean, it's close to 90 home sites.
Mhm.
It's a lot of sites. A lot of people have come up from the city and live there.
Right.
Yeah.
Which one? You want to get into that next?
Well, whatever, but I'm just saying that it is.
Weston, you wanted to hear about the first party.
Yeah.
Yeah, social. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's
I remember.
focus on that.
I remember we were talking about that. The first party we were invited to was probably in 1964, or early 65. Yeah, we came in June 64, June 1. So it was soon after that, a party at, let's see, what's his name? Chavez?
Ed Chavez.
Ed Chavez and Ava Van Ryn.
Right. Block and
They
Lane.
were together then, married. And it was an artist party. And I guess we certainly weren't invited because of me. It had to be you. And what I do remember, and here really have to go into something that you're not going to be crazy for, but another one of my rants. This was a real booze party. I've got nothing against booze. I mean, you can see all the wine around here. But I have been and am still a devout believer in pot. And it's a different kind of, I mean, it's a very raucous, hard liquor, I think, in a party. Anyway, there was no pot, there was hard liquor. Pot was for other kinds of people, and I always felt about it, and I still do, that it's a sacrament, and which doesn't mean I think booze is, booze has its place, but it's a whole different thing. And that party, I remember for being drunken, which is very different from stoned. It's a different kind of party, not my kind of party. Your turn.
I don't know. You can edit this out if it's not kosher. But I remember that David Ballantyne went down the hill and got into a rut. And, do you remember this?
No, at the party?
After the party, I remember
Really?
hearing about it afterwards. And driving to me was a whole different culture. And that kind of sort of flamboyant. I mean, people took it as this was a humorous incident and sort of chalked it up. And I just remember the strangeness of it.
I'm not
And
clear.
And I don't ever remember being at pot parties, sorry, but I don't remember. I remember our social life in those days was pretty much with Joe and Rosie and Bruce and Jean and Jane and Happy.
Yeah, these were not.
And this was not pot-oriented at all.
No, it's true. It was more,
A
grass was more of a solitary thing,
Yeah, yeah.
but not,
For you, yeah.
not entirely.
Not entirely.
Yeah, but most of the people we knew were not
No. No.
into pot.
But I don't remember. I remember parties with lots of people, many more than maybe we're just not invited now, and I'm not privy to them. But it seemed to me it was much more of a social culture, that people gathered and danced and
Yeah.
partied in a way that isn't happening now in Woodstock. Now, it might be, I'm just not privy
No,
to
I
it.
think,
And
I
it could
think-
be our age group.
yeah.
Because-
I think that goes on. There are new people, and of all things, I would say, I mean, there's still there's a bigger artist community than there was when we came here,
Oh, yeah. I think
and a
there are
more
many.
active one, I think, and a less politicized one. It was very much the artist community in '64 was really political and on the left, and which was nice in ways, but not in all ways at all. There was a lot of dogma.
Weston, let's pick up some of the things that you happen to have an interest in if at this
Right,
point.
I would be interested, Grace, in how your art evolved in Woodstock, what organizations you were affiliated with, and how things moved along, and how your career evolved.
But
Well,
again, talk to Alice rather than
Just
listen.
because
Sure.
of the camera.
Because of the line.
pardon me, Western.
Okay.
We'll pretend you're
Unless
over
you
here.
want to say something.
No, you got it.
Well, when we first came, I was a member of a gallery, or I became a member of a gallery in Manhattan, which was a cooperative gallery, 55 Mercer. So there was a lot of commuting back and forth, and I felt as if I still had ties to New York and a life there. And Edgar Rosenthal, Blum, I knew that was wrong, was very welcoming and supportive. He had a gallery where the Playhouse is now. Polaris, right. And there were various venues that I showed at, but I was really, really finding my way. And it isn't until recent years that when somebody asks me what I do, I have the courage to say I'm an artist. That didn't occur until, I'd say, 10, 15 years ago. There was a lot of time in Woodstock where I felt very an outsider. I didn't have that much connection to other artists until Alan and Mamie and David Hornung, and I became close to Mary, Frank, and
Stella, too.
Stella. And I guess that's the last, maybe it's longer than I think. It's
It is.
25 years.
That's right.
Yes.
Really? Wow.
Good 25
Okay.
years.
But before that, and I guess we're talking about early history, I felt as if people were very skeptical. An artist, yeah, we know about them. They do nothing or something. Anyway, that certainly changed. I feel very welcomed now in the community, and people are very responsive to the work, I feel, and I feel as if they've been exposed to a lot of it and they remember it, and often I'm told it means something to them, which is very lovely to hear. It's changed, and my work, I often wonder, would it be different if we had remained in the city? It went through a period of being aware of nature and making these large urethane rocks, which you could carry around with you, and dogs peed on, literally. And my work, if you're really interested, has evolved through many stages and many materials. And there was a period when I did a lot of figurative work, people in tension, in ambiguous kind of relationships to each other. And I did another, anyway, the work began to be shown, like at the Kleinert and like at the Dorsky. And I also had for 14 years a gallery in the city, the Bernice Steinbaum Gallery, where, again, that involved a lot of commuting. And probably the exposure in New York affected the work somewhat. So it's been a mix. I feel as if the city has contributed and living here has contributed, but mostly I feel it's kind of a kind of vertical journey. And I'm really happy we moved to this house after, I think I counted up once, 12 moves, and I have a real studio with really mostly everything at hand. Thank goodness for the Catskill Art Store in town, and for having other artists around. We pay each other studio visits. That's crucially important to me. And there's opportunity to see other people's work. And there are a lot of working artists here, and good ones. And we're still able to get into the city, and now I have a gallery in the city again, so I'm working toward a show there. And that feels good to know that the work will be seen by a lot of people in Manhattan, not just up here. Somehow that wider community is important, I feel. Although this smaller venue is nice in its own way. But was that specific enough or too general?
No, that's
or-
perfect.
That was
Oh,
good.
okay.
Should we,
And that smaller community, by the way, is the one that interests me, which is a difference between us that also interests me, that difference. I mean, more and more, I'm through with it now. I'm like, you can see lounging here how retired I am. But I made that decision I made on that windy, cold street corner stayed with me. I wanted to impact people locally. I had once a telling conversation with Marty Garbus about this years and years ago. And I understood where he was coming from. I mean, he's the best First Amendment lawyer in the country, probably that there is. But he wanted the big world. I wanted the little one. And that's a conscious choice, and I've never regretted it.
Well, there was this kind of perspective at the time of act locally and, I mean, think globally and act locally.
Yeah.
It seems like you followed that idea.
Yeah.
yeah. And also, some of that was notoriety. He wanted attention too, a lot of media attention and things like that too.
Boy, do I've come to wanting so no attention. You wouldn't believe it. I meant it when you walked in and I said, I'm Grace's senior studio assistant. That is how I introduce myself.
Well,
I've had enough attention.
you've had a
Well,
character
you're getting
shift.
attention now, right through
Yeah.
here. So
Well,
So-
you'll have
That
to bear with
frankly
it.
troubles me. It does, but I figure it's a quiet kind of attention.
It's good.
Somebody wants, it's not going to be a banner on a plane flying across town or anywhere. I deplore that.
That's true.
I
Was there
like
something
the,
else you wanted to follow up with?
Well,
Just about the art stuff with Grace. There was this organization you
Yeah,
were
Fusco, you were interested in.
How did
Fusco.
you,
Gerd Stern, who was the kind of moving force of USCO, was a friend, and he asked me to show in the gallery at the Maverick,
Right down the road.
right down the road. And then there was also in our neighbor's barn, we had a show. But I never felt particularly allied with them aesthetically at all. They were on a different track than I was.
Can you describe that more specifically, what that track was and your track?
It was the collective of making art. It was
Us
that
company.
us company,
Grace
and
was not one of the us.
I was not. And I think they were much more interested in, well, it had a drug aspect to it, an LSD kind of vision. And I always felt that was an acquired vision and not my own, and one I wasn't interested in.
Okay, so it's probably not that relevant then.
No, I
think-
mean, I knew that you were affiliated and there was some connections. And stuff.
Yeah, it was the friendship with Gerd.
Okay.
And some of the others
Yeah.
in the group.
Some
And
of the
Weston,
others.
you had
Personal.
wanted something about a musician or something? There was
Right.
something on your
About
mind
the
about?
sound outs. Well, I think you did help Jocko Moffat briefly with the sound outs at the Playhouse.
Yes. You had an intriguing question in there. Something about,
Do you have a favorite story to tell about this sound out? That's what you put in
Well,
there.
maybe that's a way to go forward. Do you have it?
yeah, I do have a favorite story, and it's short. At the first sound out on Pan Copeland's Field, I think that was the first one, I was the lawyer for the sound out, and did work for Jocko. So we're all sprawled out on Pan Copeland's lawn. I think you were with the kids, but I was there.
Sure, I was with the kids.
In fact, I know I was there because heading there when I was not stoned in the car, there was a blockade. In fact, that's why I was called to be there. It was all so fortuitous. What a nice evening that was. The police, the state police, the local police, they blocked off the road before you could reach the field and the fans farm. And so I got a call, so I came and I said, I'm the lawyer for this event. What's the problem? And we had a long discussion, and I don't remember what the discussion was, but it had to do with the fact that Pan had leased it, and I was the lawyer, and there was the First Amendment and right to assemble and all kinds of stuff. And so the barricade came down, and that was good, and I decided I'm there, I might as well go. And so I went, and the music started, and as the music was going on, Lordy, what is his name? Abby Hoffman.
What?
Abby Hoffman was there, and he had a big bag, like a big cloth bag, and it was filled with joints. I mean, there were hundreds. It must have held and he went through like the crowd, like the Pied Piper, just like that. It was one of these dream events, and it was a good night.
It felt a little more down home when we first came. The green wasn't quite as elaborate as it is now. It was much more modest, and it had a funkier feel. Now it's got some cement and plantings, and there was a more intimate feeling about the town. And there are many more tourists. It's hard to find a parking space, which changes the character of the town enormously. But it still has that kind of special laid-back intensity, if there is such a thing. And I feel, because I guess we've put down roots and established close friendships, that there is more of a feeling of community within the people we know. I feel a connection to a wide group of people, and I feel a general kind of friendliness that I didn't feel when we first came. And possibly we were, because of the hall, when we initially came, people were suspicious of us. You know, we were kind of this unknown, energetic couple who God knows what they were going to perpetrate. So, I mean, I've come to feel, to answer David's question from before, I've come to certainly feel much more at home in town when we...
Okay.
Well, it was, I can't pinpoint when, but it was early on in my practice up here in the 70s, undoubtedly in the 70s. Probably yes, before 1975. And I'm sitting in my office, which was set up my own, where I work, was a pair of couches like this facing each other and a bigger table in the middle, as low as this, but big, and that's where I'd write or whatever. Very, as I thought, informal. The couches were closer together than this. And I don't remember the morning that it was a very early morning. And I've got to find a way to say this without disturbing myself about it. I was doing a lot of stuff then, really a lot. When I retired, I took my diaries, which I threw out last week, by the way, from 1971, 2, and 3. They didn't have anything of interest in them except...
No, I'm sorry, you don't know that.
No, my
historian
diary
knows
is...
that.
I didn't write a diary like Elizabethan literature. It was like so-and-so at 9:10. That's all it was. But I looked at them, and it brought back this aha moment, which was that my days were full, let's put it that way. I mean, from early morning until often I'd be at a planning board in Shandaken until midnight, or in Woodstock, or in Gardner, where the land was. Lands were all over the place, Stone Ridge. And there was a morning when I was sitting on the couch. It was very early. I'd come to work early. And I had this vision. It's a vision, that's highfalutin. What I saw was myself juggling. I don't know if they were apples or oranges. I like to think they were oranges, but it's probably apples. Juggling them in the air, and this one was the brokerage company that I had, which had I think 3 offices. I may be forgetting something. Saugerty, Shandaken, Woodstock. Riverby, which was all over the county. The law practice. I think that was basically what I was doing. And I thought, oh, can I get another one up in the air? And that thought utterly delighted me. There was not then too much that I, how to put it, couldn't do enough. I was apparently, look at me now, bursting with energy. It was fun. It was, and that was a moment, that was a real moment, that perception, and I would feel that, or that would come back to me many times afterward.
What year was that?
Well, it's got to be before the shit hit the fan, which was the Arab-Israeli war and the oil embargo, which collapsed everything, the economics of my work, which was 75.
So maybe 74.
74, probably.
How about for you, Grace?
Mm-hmm. For me, I think it was gradual, becoming to feel really at home and appreciating Woodstock. I walked a lot on this road, and that was delight for me. And I'll tell you about this moment at a solstice concert of Happy's early on, when there was just this feeling of such community and connectiveness between all of us there, and such an appreciation and a coming together. And And that was a special moment. I remember that feeling, this couldn't happen in New York. This is here. And I've had many moments like that, walking through town, knowing people, saying hello, saying hello. That's just, in New York, it isn't like that.
There isn't a community,
There-
really,
and
in New York.
That's special.
We
Really
lived in New York
special.
a long time. We knew a lot of people,
Yes.
a lot of people.
And
But it wasn't a community like it is here. That's why, I think that's the core of why we came here, in terms of the children.
yes, that was
Yes,
nice.
it was, the city was not a place to bring up a child in 1962, 3, and 4. Not by our standards.
Finding community is a big thing. I
Mhm.
mean,
Another,
Also, had
I'm
that,
sorry. No, go ahead, guys.
we volunteered for the soup kitchen. And I remember having that feeling too. We're part of a community. We're connected. And, but I wouldn't call it an aha moment. The aha moment was, oh, the soup all over the trunk of our car, the smell won't go away.
do you have any Woodstock personalities that have affected you that you want to talk about or not?
I have one.
Oh,
Albert Grossman
oh,
touches on a whole lot of things, but specifically with him, he had a business philosophy that I really liked, and the way he described it, and I'm paraphrasing, was that he would scatter a whole bunch of seeds out there. And he said most of them are just they're not gonna take off. They're gonna either die or not really prosper. But maybe, not maybe, but some of them, or one of them, will really take off. And that's a kick. Now, he meant it in two ways. It's a kick financially, but I think more than that, he meant it. And the way I take it is, there is something about it's the entrepreneurial process. It's been debased in the West to a large degree. But there's something in there that strikes a chord in me and in others. I think it can be a very good chord. It's not most of the time. I think it was with Albert. I think he was doing the right thing. He really was, and doing it very, very well. Can't remember how. I mean, I was his lawyer for about 9 years, 8 years. During the time, he kept tearing out the fireplace in the where is now the studio, the
Bearsville Studios?
Bearsville, yeah, the Bearsville, the big building there in back of the cafe and the Chinese restaurant. I don't know how many times he tore that out because it wasn't right. People really laughed about it. It wasn't. You got to understand that kind of thing. If you want something right, you've got to be prepared to really stand behind it to do it. And he was great that way. He was an enormously interesting man.
Okay.
Do you think he affected, are you done?
No, go ahead.
Do you think he affected Woodstock?
You bet.
Albert Grossman, how would you say that? How do you think he shaped Woodstock? Or
Well,
what
if I had
influence?
been a manager,
Mhm.
an entrepreneurial manager of musicians, and had the kind of talent that he managed and worked with in this area. It would change any area. Something just moved.
Yeah,
What
the
was
oil.
that? Oh, the oil is
Caracal.
being delivered.
Yeah.
I thought I heard something.
I hear it
Sorry.
too. It's okay.
Yeah. Mm.
So,
Grace, do you have a personality that you think influenced you or made a difference in your life here? I mean,
I-
as a personality rather than as a friend,
Oh,
you know?
no, I don't think so.
Can't think of.
so I'm curious if say imagine that you're traveling and you meet some people and they say, "Where are you from?" And you say, "Well, I'm from Woodstock." They say, "Oh, Woodstock! Wow, I've heard of that." What's it like? How would you describe it?
It's like Bethel Woods. That's what they think it is.
That's their impression.
Yeah, they don't have a clue what the town, most people from outside, they don't know that there's a difference between Woodstock and Woodstock.
Right.
Yeah, not at all. But to those who know, there's a real aura about this town, I think. And that's, I don't know whether that's more pleasant than otherwise sometimes. I mean, people have used to come down to my office searching for, it's like pilgrims in India. Where is Bob Dylan's house? Where is this? Where is the festival? It's kind of cute. I guess maybe it'll still happen with their grandchildren. I don't know.
Okay.
Do you want to, should we do the phrase or credo that guides your life, or philosophy that guides your work, or something like that, like your final, I like that, a phrase or credo that guides your life, or,
Mm.
I like that. He's going to
I've
think of
got one,
his while
but do
you
you
talk.
have something?
Wow, the camera's running. Is there?
Why don't we start with Jerry since he has one? and then
Right.
Move to you. if
Yes,
something comes
you're
up.
much more
Well,
knowing.
I'm much more political than Grace. And by political, I mean, we're both very involved and interested in what's going on in the world out there, but I think I connected much more with what I've done and what I was about. And what I was about, as I said earlier on this, the point of all of this was not just to have fun, that was a point, and to lead an interesting life, but to leave the world somewhat better, even if you had a hard to find exactly where I could point. That's what I've been about. And so the credo comes from, of all places, and I don't think I've ever had I've never believed in any kind of deity or person, or the closest I come to that would be Eugene Debs. And my credo would be from, who the hell is it anyway? We were just talking about him with Gerd Baba.
Meher Baba.
Meher Baba. Yeah, good. Names are eluding me. Meher Baba, mastery through servitude. I don't think it has a damn thing to do with what he meant, but what it meant to me and means to me is that you work. Your work is what's important. You work. You do what you do because it needs to be done. This is an imperfect world, and it needs mending, maybe just a stitch here or whatever. That's what your work is. And that's like being indentured. You're indentured to that work. You have to do it.
Well,
Good.
Okay. Anything come to you, Grace, or should we?
Yes, I've been thinking a bit. It's very different from Jerry. I think I just want what I do, I want to do the best I can. And when the children were growing up, I wanted to be the best mom I possibly could be. And I think my making a difference in the world is we have 2 kids that I think are special, and that the world is a better place for them being in. As far as my work, which impels me constantly, I'm always at it even when I'm not in the studio, which is not much of the time because I'm mostly there. I feel, on one hand, I feel it's a very self-indulgent endeavor. On the other hand, I hope I am bringing some aesthetic pleasure into this world, which I think is worth something. Maybe not, I don't know, compared to feeding children who have no food. I've sort of given up with that comparison all the time. And I was a probation officer for a while, which was an interesting change. I did that for a year. And I thought, oh, is this quote making that difference? And I did that the best I could for a year. But I really felt at the end of the day that either I wasn't equipped enough to really help these kids, or they just needed money. They were poor. They were in desperate straits, a lot of them. And I couldn't provide money or a loving family for them. And so I kind of let go of that. I had for a long time thought I would be some kind of person that dealt with people one-on-one, and help that way. But that was really, again, impelled from selfish reasons. I'm interested in people. I like to find out about them. And anyway, back to the studio where I am obsessively engaged. I hope to provoke thought and to have people think about themselves quietly as well when they see my work. But mostly I realize it's to give me pleasure and to give people who see it pleasure. And I guess it's very old-fashioned and very, very out of favor. But I care about making some beauty in the world. That's the best I can tell you.
That's good.
That's
That's good.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's a good credo, that's
Perfect.
for sure.
Both of you, perfect.
Oh,
It's great.
very different.
Different. Yeah, but
You always just seem so surprised that you're different.
Yeah, because
What?
we
You
feel
are very different. You're different.
we
people.
are. We're very different, but yet we feel so, meshed.
I know the same. I have the same drill. I think you're one person, but you're really not.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It always surprises me.